TV and over-the-top entertainment and generate $391 billion, right? So TV would be 350 and games would be 391. So games is on the trajectory to be the foremost form of entertainment on the planet, like bar none, hands down. And apparently, as we were saying earlier with this 2.5 billion gamers, between 50 and 70% of connected people play games. Whether that's a game on your phone, that's a game like you're playing on your PC, or you're playing Animal Crossing on Switch, everyone is playing games. It's part of our intrinsic like fabric as a society. And to sort of drive this point home, this sort of bigger than the movies, right? Bigger than cinema. You have Take-Two Interactive with the two biggest releases in entertainment history, not games history, entertainment history. Red Dead Redemption with $725 million grossed in the first 72 hours. That was actually over a weekend. And GTA 5 with over $1 billion in its first 72 hours. This is just in sales. This one did not happen over a weekend, so you can't compare like a total box office weekend. But here's the perspective. The Avengers Endgame was 640 million opening weekend. And we've got a game over here that's selling in the same amount of time period more than Avengers, right? So games as an entertainment medium matter a lot. And so why do games matter as a business? Well, big tech is betting big on games. This was an article here from that was published a couple of months ago, basically looking at and sort of breaking down the strategy, the game strategy for big tech. Whether that be Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Apple. Apple now with the Apple Arcade, so it's gone sort of doubly down on games as well. But now you get Phil Spencer here. As a tech company, you simply have to be in games. Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox there for Microsoft, the quote is a little self-serving given that he's the head of Xbox, but it drives the point home because when we talk about cloud, as this giant, as a huge business and strategic vertical for Amazon with AWS, obviously, which is where I work. Google has the Google Cloud Platform and Microsoft has Azure, both of which has seen significant growth. They all have a games strategy. You have to, because of the impact of game servers themselves, honestly, and all the game backend services. So we see a common pattern that repeats within these large cloud businesses, right? So you have AWS, and then we have Game Tech, which is our vertical to support games, specifically games. Like here at AWS, we're arranged a little differently, where usually we just look at and support a wide variety of customer segments. Within Game Tech, we are looking at creating services specific for games. You can look at this when we have a service called GameLift, which is managed game servers in the cloud, and it's all about having an up-the-stack service that helps you manage your games. So like game developers just want game servers, and that's exactly, we take the underlying primitives, the EC2s of the world, and make it special just for games. And then you have the content piece, which is on the right. So you have the cloud on the left, the vertical, the strategy of how to approach the game vertical in the middle, and then all the content on the right, right? So Fortnite is all in on AWS. Epic Games, huge for AWS, right? They were on the reInvent stage 2018, not last year, the year before, right as they were blowing up. Supercell, Clash of Clans fame, also a huge AWS customer. And then New World, which we have Amazon Game Studios. So we also are developing our own games. New World publicly released and announced MMO going to be coming out, I think it's May. We'd have to check the Amazon webpage, but it's there. And we see this across the other ones as well. Google Cloud has Google Game Servers, which they just announced. They have Stadia for game streaming, which is a more B2C kind of play there. And then they just signed a big deal with Activision Blizzard to bring the Overwatch League to YouTube gaming. right? So that's sort of their content strategy, and they would say that YouTube has the highest amount of game content there is on the planet, which is actually true. So if you, I mean, if you go, you can just go watch videos of people playing games or people having played games on YouTube all day long. And then Azure, we see something very similar there. They have Microsoft Game Stack, which is all the services to build games and then run them on Azure, or and they have Project xCloud, which is supposed to be the competitor in a way to Stadia. It's their streaming solution. And of course, Microsoft has Xbox, which, so out of all the three, it's probably the most household name of them all. And it has all the Xbox studios within that. The folks creating Forza, Gears of War, Halo, that's all within that. So you see that, like, within the cloud wars, like bizarre term, but within the sort of the competitiveness of the cloud, games exists in each of these players, and it's a strategic vertical for all of them. So games are important, but as we say, content is king. And this is sort of what we were getting at with the YouTube concept, and we're going to dive into that here in a second, because when we say that games is the new form of entertainment, it's also competing against the Netflixes of the world. And if you go back to 2018, I don't know, for those that follow the stock market closely, sorry, the 2019, when Netflix released its Q1 earnings, they say we compete with and lose to Fortnite more than HBO. So for those that think games for the longest time has been often like, it's like in this like bizarre shadow realm where like people know the game industry exists, but like it's kind of niche. It's not anymore, and it can't be, right? When you have people like Netflix coming out and saying our main competitor is actually a video game, not another over-the-top streaming service, right? Like that, like the world has taken notice at this point. Like the business world has taken notice, and so the strategy, like we talk about the cloud strategy and providing cloud services for these companies, but there's also a content strategy behind it, because you have the pairing of these large tech with the content and the streaming platforms. You have Amazon that bought Twitch back in 2014 for $970 million, right? And Twitch is the foremost leading game streaming platform there is. We'll talk some more about that and how that's sort of changed games socially. Then you have Google with YouTube. YouTube is just a behemoth. So they've done incredible thing. Google has done incredible things with YouTube, bought for $1.65 billion back in 2006. There's some stats on how far that has come. We'll get to that later. And then Microsoft also bought Mixer. Bought Mixer in 2016. It was called Beam at the time, another fellow Seattle startup. And this was for an undisclosed amount, actually. But so it also has this live streaming and content sort of play. So all the big tech firms are both supplying the infrastructure, the picks and shovels, right, the cloud native components to the games industry, and also providing them mechanisms to capture the consumer. So it's both a B2B play and a B2C play. These all here being the B2C component of like, how do you actually get to the consumer themselves, right? So that's the play there. Okay, so we sort of run through. Let me take a pause there for a second. Let's check the poll EV and see if we've got any questions. Oh, Hearthstone Final Fantasy VII Remake. I don't see any questions here yet. All right. If anybody has questions, you can feel free to put them in chat as well. I am monitoring that. That might be easier. But the other one, before we move on, let's see if folks are still paying attention. Go ahead and answer. Go ahead and answer this one. On the poll EV, we pull this back up. Okay, so this is actually very interesting. I like this. This is sort of polarized. Like, I actually didn't know what to expect when I was collecting data, but that's why we run experiments, because it's interesting. All right, so it's sort of like I'll call it like more like an even 50-50 split on on the Ninja one here. All right, so this is or most people don't. All right, so it's kind of gone the other way. We talked about this one. Okay, so why do we see these big tech players in like getting in this business other than there's a lot of money behind it? Obviously, it makes business sense to do it. So like because you can make a business case for being in games. There's another one here that is more like I talk about sort of games are part of the social fabric of society. Um, and this is really sort of why games matter on a deeper level. Because for the longest time, this was the perception of games. This is the South Park WoW episode for those that remember, right? Like in the 80s and the 90s, gamers were nerds. Gamers were nerds that like were introverts, that like they weren't the cool kids. It was like the nerds and the jocks, and so for the longest time you had this perception that like, oh, gamers just like played in their basement all day long and had zero social skills, and you know, like that was it. And then it has all changed, and here I'm gonna explain why. This was the theory. This was sort of the pervasive theory until 80s, 90s, 2000s, and actually most of the 2010s until Ninja, and until Tyler Blevins came around. And it's what's funny here is that since we're all virtual, I actually get to invite some friends and family. So I think my mom is watching at some point. This could have been me, Mom, okay? And we'll get to it here in a sec. Just like, I should have just been like games, all right? Instead of like, you know, oh, you should just be like a hardcore engineer and like, you know, go on this like super linear path. No, okay. All right. There's my soapbox for the day. And Ninja came around. And so like what happens here? What happens here is that Ninja comes in like 2017, 2018, and for the first time, and then Fortnite comes out, and so for the first time, games go what I would call mainstream, and of this, I have no doubt that at this point in time in society, games have gone mainstream, and for those that aren't like awake to it yet, you will be. Um, and there shouldn't be a world in which like you like have to understand what's going on here, because it plays into digital media marketing, influencer marketing, and the new concept of like the thank you economy that like has some bizarre economic traits, and it's just interesting to study. So Ninja takes Fortnite mainstream. He's the first gamer in history to actually have a skin in a game. Like they made a skin for him. Like he's in a game. All right. He did a New Year's party with Twitch and like with tons and tons of viewers. He's been on CNBC. He's been on Ellen. He's been interviewed by Jimmy Fallon. And he has a shoe deal with Adidas. Like this is unprecedented that you would have a gamer on the level of professional athletes. And for the longest time, esports and the concept of gamers as professional athletes was sort of on the sidelines, and people didn't want to acknowledge it. And now it's inevitable. Like just the fact that you have like an Adidas shoe deal, and where I don't know how much the deal is worth, but it's worth a lot. And we'll get into some of the figures of how much these people are making here in a second. But it's now since extended. A lot of people were streaming and doing like the whole Twitch thing for a lot of years, but nobody really broke it into the mainstream like Ninja. Now you have people like Dr. Disrespect, another Twitch streamer. He's going to get his own TV series. So when we talk about games being the next like the biggest form of media, you have streamers who are now transitioning from games into traditional media, right? So traditional media needs to like wake up to this because it's happening. And you have all the amazing charitable work that these streamers and these games are doing. And this has to be recognized on like just bar none, right? Like you have Dr. Lupo raises over $2 million for children's cancer in 24 hours. Like this is sort of unheard of. Pokimane, another a female Twitch streamer, very prominent on Twitch, giving back to the community $50,000 to fund esports scholarships. There are scholarships for esports nowadays. This is what I'm talking about, games and esports having gone mainstream at this point, and why people need to sort of understand this new form of media because it's happening around us. And Twitch just raised $2.76 billion for COVID-19 relief. This happened earlier this week, right? So these are non-insignificant sums of money, and sort of games being associated, always sort of been associated with charity work here. But games absolutely mainstream, and you have to understand what's happening here around us contextually. But not only have the personalities within games gone mainstream, the viewership has gone mainstream. And here I'm going to prove my point in two ways. One, the Fortnite World Cup, 81.8 million hours across Twitch, YouTube, and a peak of 2.3 million concurrent viewers. That doesn't really sound like a lot. And to be honest, it's not, because it honestly, it didn't have a lot of China, and the games have been really big in China. But here's the other point, is that when you get to something like League of Legends, which has global significance and global impact, over 100 million viewers with a peak of 44 million concurrents. And to put that into context, that's the Super Bowl. It's bigger than the Super Bowl. So when you have games on a global context drawing in more viewers than the Super Bowl, at this point, like, this is why I say this is inevitable. And it just keeps growing. And so this should hopefully put things in perspective as to how far games have come, and perhaps like where it's going in sort of in the future, right? And it's also big business. So the viewership has gone mainstream, and if we talk about specifically again why this matters to businesses, because when you capture the consumer, that also matters. YouTube ads themselves, $5 billion in Q1 ad revenue across 1.8 billion users, right? And so this is YouTube, this is like streaming, video, games, it could be anything. Twitch is a little smaller on this side. They go $300 million ad run rate, but on a much smaller user base. So like this is, it's YouTube's Q1 versus Twitch's entire year, but you can see like YouTube is basically on the trajectory to do $15 to $20 million in just ad revenue, and this is ad revenue across digital, right? This is digital ad revenue. For the longest time, we were seeing the trends being like, first it started like, okay, do you have a brick and mortar store, right? This is the Amazon model. You have a brick and mortar retail. Okay, and then do you have an online store? Like that's, Amazon came in and was like reimagined online retail. Then it was like, do you have a mobile app? Right? Everybody's asking, oh, what's your mobile strategy? How do you get users on mobile? Well, now it's, do you have a digital strategy? How do you get influencers, and how do you get people to sell your product through like these influencer channels and these streamers? So when we talk about streamers like Ninja before, at the turn, like basically in Q4 last year, there was a lot of moves across the different platforms: YouTube Gaming, Twitch, Mixer, a lot of famous ones. So Ninja ended up going from Twitch to Mixer in a deal that is somewhere on the realm of $6 to $8 million a year, right? So like, think about that. Like Ninja is making 6 to 8 million, like guaranteed to play games a year, right? It's like, if that wasn't your like childhood dream, like, I don't know, like for all the gamers out there, that's like crazy, right? And so you have all these, and then Twitch also now spending on content, because like I said, content is king, and the one who ends up owning the content will eventually probably win out.
Rich?
Yeah.
I have a question about this. So all that money, where is it coming from originally? I mean, these are people paying for ads? What is the money?
Yeah, a lot of it, a lot of it is people paying for ads. I mean, there's some in sort of like the companies that own these platforms are investing in it, right?
So
Um,
if I am a normal person and I want to watch Ninja play, is it
mhm.
free for me to watch, or do I
Yes,
have to pay? It's
yes,
free.
it's free. Hmm.
Okay, so it's purely from ads then.
Yeah, so streamers make money in like four ways. One is ads. You can sell ads or sponsorships, really,
Mm-hmm.
because sponsorships drive impressions. This is the concept of like the influencers in digital media, right?
Mm-hmm.
Influencers, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, now it's on live streaming platforms like Twitch. Next, it's going to be on TikTok. That's the next one to come, by the way, is you're going to see monetization on TikTok because all the marketers, as Devin Nash would say, the marketers come in late and then they ruin the platform because they fill it up with ads. So that's the next one that's going to be. But yeah, you're basically trying to use these influencers to organically grow your product strategy as part of your product strategy. So if you're a marketer, digital media has to be part of your product strategy, right? And to your point, Pino, like these streamers give away their best content for free and make more money doing it. Right? This is the concept of the thank you economy
Right.
that Gary Vee talks about, where you give away your best content for free and you actually end up making more money because people will give you money for the value that they intrinsically see, which economically is like upside down.
Yeah.
So from a game theory perspective, it's rather interesting to think about.
It is, yeah. So I'm a normal person, for example, I'm old and all this gaming stuff, all I do is I watch chess. But some of that indeed resonates because the guy who comments on chess games, once in a while I see an ad. But it's amazing to me because, for example, as a single user, I never click on an ad. The ad is wasted on me. So I'm still baffled by the fact that all these advertising are willing to pay this huge amount of money because evidently a fraction of the clicks, result into sales and, increase the bottom lines of the people who pay for ads.
Yeah, but as a marketer, it's quantifiable. You have a specific cost per click, and you know exactly how many impressions you have. So you can very easily calculate your ROI versus putting out like a billboard or something, where it's like very hard to understand like how many impressions you get, what your cost per click or cost per view, cost per impression, CPM, your cost per 1,000 impressions is. So you have a lot of quantifiable data with the digital media strategy, which is why I think it's like preferable.
If we want to brutally summarize this, then the money comes from the fact that people are watching an influencer and the influencer says, I just found this amazing shaving cream, and people buy the shaving creams at the end of the day.
Essentially.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. All right. Let's keep rolling on here since I know we've only got about a few minutes left. So, because I want to get to the end. Games in the era of social distancing, because this is highly relevant to where we are today. During the weekend of March 14th, right, we can see Steam hit its highest concurrent user number ever. Why? Because everybody's inside. And we have to, like, there's nothing to do. You're either watching Netflix or you're playing games. And as we said before, everyone's a gamer. So this makes sense. Games connect us during this time of social distancing. And here are the interesting stats. Twitch viewership saying up 10% just sort of in the last month here. And if you see this average viewers, the third one is the statistics in the last 30 days. I pulled this last night. So it's basically for the entire month of March. Here, 1.6 million average viewers on Twitch, up 15.5% from the month before. But the stat that you really want to look is this hours watched and compared to the same period last year. So we're holding like time constant, right? And so because of this whole like social granted, there's some platform growth in here, but we're up big. The peak viewers is the biggest jump to look at. If you look at February and January, you see 2.4 million peak viewers, 2.6 million peak viewers. March 2019, also around 2.6 million viewers. This month on Twitch, 3.4. That's not an accident, right? That is not an accident because if we're not playing, we're watching. So I'm using social proof here to prove my point. This is news clippings here where you have YouTube having to throttle folks in Europe, because everyone is home watching YouTube, saying this is Twitch's moment. The Italians over here reporting a 70% increase in internet traffic just because of Fortnite, right? Because everybody is home playing games, and Sony slowing down the PlayStation downloads in the US because of all the bandwidth considerations. Also, here's the crazy one. All sports get canceled. ESPN is on fire. They don't know what to do. They're playing classic games and trying to figure out what do we do? We have no sports for the first time in our history. And meanwhile, Riot doesn't skip a beat. This is an article published just yesterday. It's a public article. It's quite neat. If you're a fan of the LCS, which is Riot's esports, they took 1 week off to figure out how to go digital. So they took their entire production out of the studio and into the cloud. And now they're back up and running. Their sport is continuing while ESPN's over there trying to figure out what the heck to do and trying to run a 2K basketball tournament here on Friday. This is actually with the help of AWS. Riot basically went completely virtual. Amazing success story here of, again, going back to the cloud and games and how this is the future of entertainment, because it can happen anywhere and everywhere. And even our Blue Devils are on it. Look, this is Grayson Allen and Cassius Stanley. They're playing games too. Apparently Cassius is a pretty good Fortnite player, and Grayson Allen has been killing it in Apex. And if you watched he had a Modern Warfare clip where he got a 50 kill streak or something and launched a tactical nuke, which is really hard to do in Modern Warfare. So Grayson Allen, great on the basketball court and also in the virtual world. But the pros are on it too. This is what I was talking about. The NBA is planning a players-only NBA 2K tournament for Friday, because they're just sitting around not knowing what to do, right? This is sort of my point. Games are intrinsically entwined into the social fabric of society, and it's only going after this. It's if you didn't know about games before, now everybody does, right? It's only going to get bigger. All right, so that's the games piece. Let me run through the interning piece before we finish off, because I do want to get to this piece for all of you. Here's your cat meme for the morning. When you're working from home and your manager wants a word with you, this is kind of what it looks like. I can resonate here with the cat here on the couch. Differences that we've now been remote since the end of February. Amazon, basically the last week of February, more or less. It's an interesting challenge. Amazon, I think, is in a good position because we have all the infrastructure to do it. We have people that work remotely some of the time anyway, so we're kind of used to it. For other companies, it might not be the case. But some of the challenges here, there's no time box for work. Perhaps you've heard of the term time boxing an assignment, where you're all right, for the next 2 hours, I'm just going to be super focused and nothing's going to distract me, and I'm just going to do this work, and however much I get done, that's what I get done. Going to and from work is essentially a time box, right? You're at work 9 to 5, 9 to 6, or if you're in iBanking, you're there 24 hours a day, and it doesn't matter anyway. But there's no time box at work, right? So you could start at 7 in the morning, and there was one day I didn't get out of this chair till 10 at night, because you just what are days anymore, and what is the time is sort of irrelevant. But that requires a much higher degree of self-direction. So you have to be now more than ever, you have to be your own manager. You have to be your own manager of your time. You have to be your own manager of your assignments, and you have to make sure that it's very easy to not want to do the hard, ambiguous tasks because it's easy to have your mind wander. So you have to be very intentional about what you do and how you plan your day. I got this notebook over here that's I'm literally resorting to writing down what I have to do every day just to make sure I get to it. Because even if I put it on my computer, I'm just gonna forget. It's not gonna happen. So whatever mechanism you need, you got to make sure that you stick with it, because if not, you can get easily distracted. And then meeting purely VidCon versus in person, we've had some challenges with that, although it's gotten a lot better. But here's what to watch out for. especially when you're on your internship, because this is just going to be magnified, right? Because your internship is your 3-month opportunity to nail it and get that full-time job. And you guys have a really hard task in front of you to do this remotely. So you got to recognize work from home is still work. Whatever you need to like set up like an area that is work and not distracted, like you got to go do that. If you need an extra monitor, go invest in an extra monitor. I even got my chair from work. If my desk would have fit in my car, I would have taken my desk home. Like whatever you need to do to make your workspace feel like work, you have to do that, because people, especially not in firms that aren't used to working from home, are suspicious about working from home. I think this is going to change in the future because we are running what is probably the biggest corporate American experiment in history, where we send everybody home and see if they can still be productive. But naturally people are suspicious about working from home, because if they can't see you working, then people's like they resort to sort of negative thoughts, and that's just how like human psychology works. So you need to understand that is reality. And no news is good news does not apply with your manager. You want to be checking in as frequently as possible, because we judge others we judge ourselves by our intentions, and we always keep perfect score, but we judge others by their actions, right? So while we always keep perfect score in our head, others aren't doing that for us. So we need to be incredibly intentional, especially when we can't, like, your manager can't see you, or you can't just like pop into your manager's office, to always be communicating and like documenting what it is exactly that you're doing, so you make sure that you have deliverables by the end of your internship that are solid. So here's what you can do. I mean, you've got to work hard to establish that first positive impression, especially because you're remote, because you're not going to get, because it's going to be harder to do it remotely. And in the event that your internship suddenly changes to not remote, you won't get a second chance. So like if you end up having to go to the office for the last month and a half or the last month of the internship, depending on how it works out at your specific company, people are going to remember how you performed when you were remote. And regardless if you kill it in that last month, if you were like, oh, so-and-so, Ritz wasn't really as productive when he was remote, you're sunk. It's over at that point, right? So you want to come back into the office to be like, this is where I say be part of the solution, not the problem. Ritz was really helpful when he was remote, especially when he was remote as even interning. He was able to accomplish all these different things, and you probably could do less in that last month that you were in the office, but because you did such a good job in the first 2, you still get the job, right? The part where you're away from the office is going to matter a lot more. So you got to watch out for that. And I would also suggest you go to work in the same time zone, whether that means you go out and like live in that area. This may be a little bizarre, but like if you're trying to work like with a team at Amazon and you're on the East Coast, that's going to be hard. That 3-hour time difference is going to be difficult. So I would say like just try to be in the same time zone. And then I offer you guys this as the magic loop. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, take away the magic loop, because this is how you accelerate your career. This comes from Ethan Evans, one of the VPs at Twitch Prime, well, the VP of Twitch Prime, actually. First, you do your job well, then you ask your manager what their biggest problem is, and then you do that well. But you can't, there's no takebacks. If you ask your manager what their problem is and they say something and you're like, I didn't really think that's interesting, no, you can't do that. You have to do it regardless of what it is. And then when you solve that well, you ask them for the next biggest problem and you repeat that loop. And that's how you get promoted to the level of your own incompetence, because that's eventually how we all top out. But that is how you speedrun your career. So that is the magic loop. And if you just take that away from this entire thing, you'll be doing pretty good. This will work in your internship, and it's a bit more compressed because you only have 3 months to do it, but it also work in your day job or your full-time position as well. For those looking for roles, how do I get a job in games? Your full-time product roles, there's a few here. The ones in game tech are on my team, so I think those full-time roles are still hiring. I don't know if if the intern one is still open. I would have to check, but I know there is an intern position. The bottom one is in California. The top 4 are in Seattle for the full-time folks. I'll leave this slide up here for a second. So you can, if you should just write down the numbers, like 105, where's, I don't even have a mouse anymore, like 105, 7135, like those are the job numbers that you want, in case you're looking for jobs in tech, or I can pass these on to Francisco afterwards when we're done as well. For those that are looking for more information, a lot of the stuff in this, if you want to dive further, a lot of the stuff in this presentation comes from, as I said, Ethan Evans, who's a fabulous VP at Twitch Prime, and he does Twitch and YouTube. He will teach you how to speedrun your career. This is relevant to everybody in this chat. If you want to know how to interview better, resume tips, how to get a raise, how to deal with your manager, how to manage up, how to plan your career, how to deal with egos in the office, or just in general, how to get a better job, go to twitch.com/TV/Ethan Evans or follow his YouTube. I think he's streaming live tonight at 6 o'clock Pacific. But he's a career coach, basically, and he's been at Amazon for 15 plus years and has startup experience and all that, and he's great. And then for those interested in the digital media and marketing space, we're talking about the Twitch influencers and just wants to know more about games, Devin Nash is the resource to go to on that. He's sort of like a meme lord, but he's kind of funny and entertaining. So if you found some of the concepts in this this very high level talk interesting, you want to find more there with Devin Nash. All right, that's it. Let's check if there's any questions, or I'm happy to take a few questions here if you just throw them into the chat. And I have a few minutes left.
While people think about what to ask, I can throw my 2 cents in there. The last part, I felt a little more connected, because one of the challenges in my world, when you work in academia, you have these humongous projects and you're all by yourself. And so the risk of getting lost is very much relevant. And so you walk on these huge projects by yourself, and you spend 3 weeks and then it was all wasted. This is talk about research, right? And so the trick there is to break the big task into small little chunks and check routinely with your co-authors or whoever is working with you, break it down. So when you're talking to your manager and he says, we should fix this problem, that's a humongous challenge, you should volunteer something like, why don't we start with this little bit? That's my 2 cents. I mean, I've experienced this on my skin for many, many years. And breaking it down in small little steps so you can track progress is one of the tactics that work best.
Yep. Interesting. Unknown threats to the game industry. Oh, man. That's an interesting one, considering the games industry itself has been the unknown threat, like, to the media industry. I think games have gotten a bad, there's like always, like games sometimes get politicized for various different, like violent video games. I think that is actually behind us for the most part at this point. I'd have to think about unknown threats to the game industry. So it is perhaps some of it does feel like the esports industry does feel a little bubbly at times. When Pino, you were talking about like, why do people like put these adverts here? I don't think the price discovery on that hasn't hit a point yet. Like, we don't actually know how much these things are worth. Mm-hmm. So people just like VC just like throw money at it, just like, because like this is where all the eyeballs are at. So we just got to throw like countless amounts of money at it. At some point that will stop. At some point that will end. Mm-hmm. And there will actually be like a real, like what the actual price should be. And I think that's going to be significantly lower than what it is today. Yeah. How do you see the intersection of cloud on initiatives like Stadia and online gaming, where like Warzone, in which every millisecond is important? So on the intersection of cloud, so cloud is important because of latency, and games like when you talk about Warzone, Fortnite requiring like sub 40 millisecond latency. So the initiative there, or the big thing for cloud, is to just be everywhere. Cloud allows you to host your game servers closer to your players and be in more locations. So you as a game developer don't have to think about standing up infrastructure everywhere in the world, right? You can go to Google, you can go to Microsoft, you can go to AWS, and you can utilize all the different regions and be put your game as close to your player as possible. That's really what the advantage there, and of cost. Obviously, you have the scale, so it's a latency as a player experience, and game companies will always prioritize gamer experience over cost, at least at the start. So they will be try to be in more places and provision more infrastructure than necessary, because you want to nail launch. But that launch is super important. And do I think Sony is in a difficult position because of lack of cloud infrastructure? That's sort of an opinion question. I mean, Sony can partner with any of the cloud providers it wants and have, all the cloud infrastructure it needs, right? So that's sort of like why cloud is so important to the games industry, because it provides the infrastructure and lets the game developers focus on what they do best, which is developing games. Yeah. Small SMBs are being small, medium businesses. I actually don't have an answer for that one, Francisco. I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting one. A trend of AR, VR games. That's an interesting one too, from the perspective of like, it seems like I think AR is pretty solid. VR probably seems to be trending the way of 3D TVs. I don't know. We'll see. It's like the killer use case still has to reveal itself. AR, I think the killer use case revealed itself a couple of years ago with something like Pokemon Go. That showed like the power of the iPhone in an AR environment. I think that was sort of like the killer use case of AR that kind of opened the doors. But VR, we have yet to see the killer use case. Funny enough, it would be interesting if you could like VR at the office. In a sense, like since we're all remote, you could just like put on a headset and like it would be as if you were in the office. Maybe that's the killer app in the future, and it's kind of like a metaverse of sorts, a game of sorts, but I think that has yet to be determined. All right, I've got to run because I got a customer call here in a few minutes I got to prep for. Any final things?
Rich, thank you so much for your time, your super interesting and engaging presentation. I think everyone enjoyed it, so thank you so much.
All right, thanks everybody. And Francisco's got my contact information, so feel free to reach out, and I'll send you the job postings. Cool.
Bye.
All right, cheers everybody. Take care.